The Dynasty Vipers Vipercast.
Hello, I'm Matt Dolly, and this is another edition of the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast. Before we dive into this team-by-team preview series show, talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, take a second, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, because you do not want to miss all the content as we break down every single team in the NFL and give you a bit of a preview of what to expect ahead of the 2023 season. Of course, we are talking about the Philadelphia Eagles here, and we are talking about the eye of the tiger. Philadelphia, they were hungry heading into 2022. Look at the numbers. The numbers do not lie. 477 points for, 344 against. That is a plus 133 points for, points against differential right there. Their passing offense. Hey, people said that Jalen Hurts, he can't throw the ball. Look, 9th in the league, averaging 233.8 yards per game. Their run offense, just as good, if not better, ranking 4th in the league with 152 yards per game on average. Their defense, no slouch either there, especially when we're looking at their pass defense, ranked number 1 in the entire NFL, giving up just 171.6 yards per contest. And their run defense, listen, it was 16th. That's right in the middle of the pack, averaging 121.3 yards per game. Now, I mentioned that eye of the tiger. The Eagles were hungry heading into 2022. If they are going to be making a play for the Super Bowl, they cannot have that rocky downfall here. They got to be watching out for all the Clubberlangs looking to step up to take that title away from them. This is the NFC champion here right now. This is the Philadelphia Eagles, and every team in that NFC is looking to take them down. When we look at Philadelphia, they were literally one win away from winning the Kelce Bowl. Okay, it was a Super Bowl, but it had both Kelce's. Mama Kelce, she was baking cookies for everybody in her Tupperware dishes. This was the game of the year last year. Everything that was working so well for the Eagles all season long suddenly came to a crashing halt against that Chiefs team. A pass rush that was unstoppable all season long. That's 17 games. Then in the playoffs, there wasn't a thing anyone could do about it. But yet, in the Super Bowl, the Kansas City Chiefs were able to stifle that vaunted pass rush of the Philadelphia Eagles. A pass rush is something that you need if you're going to beat a guy like Patrick Mahomes, and that was not the case. For the Eagles and their fans, this was a disappointing end to an otherwise successful season. Jalen Hurts, he leveled up, and the Eagles offense was one of the few in the league that was top 10 in both passing and rushing. To no one's surprise, the Eagles, they are going to be a Super Bowl threat here again in 2023. Now, when we look at the camp battles here for the Eagles, there is some intrigue to be had here. Now, mostly it's on the Philadelphia Bulldogs, Georgia Eagles side, the things there on the defensive side of the ball more than anything. But the fatal three-way here between Rashad Penny, DeAndre Swift versus the injury bug is the most captivating event in itself here when we're talking about this Eagles team. Both Swift and Penny, they are explosive home run hitting backs. There's no question about that. They both get hit from anywhere on the field at any given time. Unfortunately, every time that they get hit, we have to hold our breath because the injury bug, he's right there. First things first, will one or both these backs come out of training camp unscathed? Now, I mean, no soft tissue injuries here, no rolled ankles. I don't even want to hear about turf toes or hangnails when we talk about these two running backs. Let's focus on the draft and what just took place here a few months ago, where the Eagles, again, why do teams continue to allow the Eagles to do what they're doing in the draft? Howie Roseman has to have pictures on just about every GM in the National Football League to allow them to have these players drop to them. First, at pick number 9, arguably the number 1 overall player in the draft, Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle out of Georgia. Go figure. That's going to be a theme here when we talk about the Eagles and this defense. Then at pick 30, maybe the best pass rusher in this game right now, out of this draft, and that's Nolan Smith. They're out of Georgia. Wait, they weren't done there yet. Then in the 3rd round, they got themselves offensive tackle Tyler Steen. Followed that up by pick number 66 with Sidney Brown. Into the 4th round, pick 105, cornerback Keely Ringo out of, you guessed it, Georgia. Finally, they rounded off the draft here in the 6th round with pick 188, Tanner McGee out of Stanford University. Now we look at the additions and the subtractions for this Eagles team throughout the offseason. Most notably, DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny in the running back room. That is the biggest addition that we noticed right off the get-go. Marcus Mariota, he's in as Gardner Minshew is out. And then you look at guys like Greedy Williams, our corner, safety Justin Evans, linebacker Nicholas Morrow, and safety Terrell Edmonds. Now, we talked about already some of these players that they lost, including the aforementioned Gardner Minshew there. But running back Miles Sanders, he's gone. Defensive tackle Javon Hargrave, he's gone. Linebacker TJ Edwards, linebacker Kaiser White, guard Isaac Samola, left tackle Andre Dillard, safety Marcus Epps, safety CJ Gardner-Johnson, wide receiver Zach Pascal. There's a lot of pieces here. And this is what happens. When you're a good team, you're going to lose good players each and every year. That's just the nature of the beast. Now, when we look at the best move that the Eagles happen to have made throughout this offseason, adding both Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift. Yes, the Eagles, they did a good job this offseason moving money around without hurting themselves. On the offensive side of the ball, the additions of Mariota, Swift, Penny, Zacchaeus there, and Steen cost them just under $10 million, while losing Minshew, Sanders, Pascal, and Samola saved them roughly $57 million against the cap. That's some pretty good cap maneuvering there from Howie Roseman. Even with the loss of Samola there, this offensive line is going to be good. So the additions of Swift and Penny, they should combine to give you one good full season between the two of them. If you get any health out of both these guys, you are laughing all the way to the bank. Now, the worst move for the Eagles, the loss of Javon Hargrave in the middle of that Eagles defense, that is going to hurt. You cannot just replace them. Yes, we know they've got the guys to do so. We talked about Jalen Carter. He's one of those guys who's going to be asked to step in there. That's 11 sacks that need to be replaced. Now, I'm not going to feel bad for the Eagles. I mentioned Jalen Carter there already. They still have Hassan Reddick. They still have Brandon Graham, Josh Sweet there, Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis, not to mention Nolan Smith that they also added through this draft. This is not a team that you need to feel sorry for when they lose players. It's really that simple. What needs to happen for this Eagles team here, I mentioned it. You can't have that Rocky syndrome here. You cannot fall victim to Clubber Lang here. No team has repeated as the NFC champions since the Eagles did this 17 years ago when they won the division between 2002 and 2004. With three teams in the NFC East all making the playoffs and a fourth team there in the Commanders that was in the hunt right to the end, there's not going to be any easy weeks for this Eagles team to kind of take for granted what they were able to accomplish last season. For the Eagles to repeat, they're going to have to take care of that division. They got to take care of the Cowboys. They got to take care of the Giants. They got to take care of that Washington team. And then they got to take care of business outside of the division. Those non-divisional games are going to include the Kansas City Chiefs, the San Francisco 49ers, the Buffalo Bills, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Miami Dolphins. With that schedule, it's going to be hard to win 14 games again this season. They can do it. They're more than capable of winning 14 games. I think a more realistic expectation here is more of a 13-4 type season. That's what I'm predicting. And I wouldn't be surprised if they go 12-5. And that's still going to be good enough to be that team at the end of the day. Them and Dallas, in my opinion, are the two top teams in the NFC East. For all intents and purposes, 12 wins, 13 wins, that should be enough to give you a good shot at the NFC East divisional crown. When you score the second most points on a per-game basis as the Eagles did last season, you're going to have some production pieces here for fantasy football. It's as easy as that. But here are your top 5 Philadelphia Eagle assets here in fantasy. At number 1, it's Jalen Hurts. Hurts was tops in fantasy, averaging 26.8 fantasy points per game. We know he can run, but his 66.5% completion rate on throws greater than 8 yards prove that he could pass as well. It also doesn't hurt that he doesn't turn the ball over, as his 1.3 interception rate proves. At number 2, A.J. Brown. Now, Brown, he was 4th in yards per route run last season and was one of just 5 receivers to top 400 yards, despite being the only one that did not have more than 100 receptions. 17 yards per reception. That'll get the job done for you. At number 3, the partner in crime here, Devontae Smith, skinny Batman. He ain't no sidekick. Brown, he led the team in targets and touchdowns, but it was Smith that led this Eagles team in receptions with 95 on his way to 1,196 yards himself. And I'm not even sure that we have seen this offense fully unleashed yet. At number 4, it's Dallas Goedert there. Goedert was tight end 5 in fantasy, and he did this in just 12 games, averaging 11.8 fantasy points per contest. Both Smith and Brown, they're going to limit Goddard's touchdown ceiling, but 13.8 yards per catch and nearly 7 targets per game, that'll keep Goddard atop the fantasy options here at the position. And at number 5, let's go with a healthy DeAndre Swift. Swift has the opportunity here to have a big year, and this goes for Rashad Penny as well. The Eagles' offensive line was PFF's highest graded unit last season. Now, DeAndre Swift, he led all running backs with 1.13 fantasy points per opportunity last season. And given the opportunities behind this offensive line, that could mean big things for Swift and Penny here in 2023. So who's that one Eagle that you have to leave every draft with? It's Jalen Hurts. Now, you could argue that A.J. Brown, and that wouldn't necessarily be wrong. I just feel that Brown loses some opportunities to Devontae Smith and to Dallas Goedert, which will keep him from being one of those players that you absolutely need. Now, last year, you were getting similar production out of Devontae Smith, who was being drafted a few rounds later than Brown, and that's going to be the case again this season. Brown is going back into the first, early into the second, while Devontae Smith is going a little bit later, round 4, round 5, round 6, depending on who you're drafting with. Now, on a points per game basis, it was Jalen Hurts that led all quarterbacks last season, averaging 25.6 fantasy points per game. Hurts, he wants to be the best. He's even out there sliding into third in a celebrity slow pitch game. That's how dedicated he is to winning. Now, the biggest bust, and again, this is all on bust potential, not necessarily being a bust. Right now, it is DeAndre Swift, who is the RB22 according to ADP, and is being selected 57 spots ahead of Rashad Penny. I'm not even sure Swift is ahead of Penny in the pecking order here for this Eagles team. Swift, his talent has never been the question. 48 receptions in just a handful of games last season in the Eagles, including a 144-yard rushing performance, 31-yard receiving game to open up the season against this very Eagles team. I guess the Eagles said, hey, can't beat him, join him, let's bring Swift in here and see what he can do for us. Now, I have a hard time trusting his health. And that risk is something that's going to carry through the drafts. It's probably going to hurt his ADP. And I think that's already being built in to a degree. When looking at the other backs that he's being drafted around, I just don't think he's the safest. He might have the best ceiling here when we talk about fantasy production. I just don't feel that he's safe. I need to know availability is often your best ability here. And Swift simply hasn't been available. But if he hits and you draft him, you are going to be having yourself a very good season. So what's the best value on this Eagles team? Because of that gap that we just talked about between Swift and Penny, Penny becomes a real value here. When Penny averaged 5.7 yards per carry throughout his career, his 2022, his explosive run rate was 10.5%, which ranked second amongst backs there with at least 50 carries, while leading all backs in yards after contact per carry at 4.37. We talked about this, about how good this Eagles team is. Basically, Miles Sanders last season, he was 5th in the league in rushing because he wasn't contacted at or before the line of scrimmage. That is a huge deal when you talk about an efficient back like Penny. Now, he did all this production here behind one of the worst offensive lines in Seattle. So, I mean, you got to look at this right now. You go from one of the worst situations as a running back and being one of the most efficient backs to a better situation with a better offensive line. If you maintain any of that efficiency, you are going to have a huge year. Even if you're splitting touches with DeAndre Swift, that gap, that 57 spot gap there in ADP, that is huge. I mean, he could even be a fantasy sleeper, but right now we're going to give that fantasy sleeper, and we know about Swift, we know about Penny, and we know about their history and their inability to stay on the field. If you are targeting a player late, perhaps with that final pick, then you need to be strongly considering Kenneth Gainwell. That's the guy you should be targeting. Gainwell averaged 4.5 yards per carry last season on 53 attempts. He also added 23 receptions on 29 targets. Now, history, it does have a tendency of repeating itself, and recent history, if that's any indication of anything, you should probably add Kenneth Gainwell as insurance for your fantasy rosters. Now, once again, this Eagles team is in the upper echelon of fantasy, and they're in the upper echelon here of the NFL. Listen, Howie Roseman and this Eagles team, they have built something that is going to have a sustainable future in Philadelphia. And once again, they are going to be pushing to be Super Bowl bound here again in 2023. Everything is there. Everything is indicating another deep playoff run for this Eagles squad.